Hey there, everyone. Welcome to The Great Retention with Camber Parker, sponsored by the YoPros. I'm Camber, your young professional expert and founder of the YoPros, where we bring you the answers you need to know about how to hire and retain the best talent, starting with the young professionals you work with. There are a lot of young professional fish in the sea, as I like to say, but how do you catch them? And what do you do once you reel them in? That's where we come in. Today, I'm thrilled to have Michelle LaFond join us, founding Legal Counsel at Cocoon, joining us virtually from Portland, Maine. I met Michelle in my first career in the insurance world at the ripe age of 21. She quickly became my friend and mentor as she spearheaded the Women's Employee Resource Group, among many other things at the company. I was amazed by her and wanted to learn how to grow into a leader just like her. We have stayed connected over the years and recently caught up, bringing me back to my earlier feelings and remembering that she was one of the female leaders that sparked my original career goals, which ultimately led me here today. For these reasons and many more, I asked Michelle to join me today because of her role in so many young professionals' lives throughout her career and her recent shift into the startup world, working for a company based in San Francisco. I knew she would have great insight to share. So Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Camber. I'm really excited to be here.
I really mean it when I say that you really sparked this initial, I think, leadership action for me in my early part of my career. So I'm very, very appreciative of you, and I'm just so thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
So we're going to do what I like to call a lightning round to start off with a few questions. So please give us a little bit of background on you, maybe personal, professional, that we didn't cover in your intro.
Great. Well, for purposes of our chat today, probably two of my identities are super important. One is that I am the mother of three young professionals. And the second is that I'm a lawyer who's been practicing for long enough that I am not in the young professional category any longer. So excited
You're an
to
experienced
add that
professional.
generational dimension. That's right. That's right. So I'm a lawyer, in I guess the highlights for that would be I spent a bit of time as a partner in a law firm in Portland, Maine, before I went in-house to a Fortune 250 company where we met, where I was served in a number of different roles, including a number of leadership roles. And then 5 months ago, I made the decision to do a career pivot and to join a startup in California, Cocoon, which delivers a software as a service product for leave administration. So family leave, parental leave, that sort of thing. And while the company's based in San Francisco, I'm now a remote worker for the first time too. So,
great. And we'll talk a lot about remote work today. But before we wrap up our lightning round, and thank you for sharing all of that, can you share a memorable experience that you've had working with one young professional or just young professionals, plural, and what that experience has looked like?
Sure. You mentioned that we met when I was an executive sponsor of the Women's Professional Employee Resource Group. Mm-hmm. And one of the real memorable experiences for me was when we planned a hackathon. And so the purpose of our group, as you know, was to attract, retain, and advance women into leadership. And we scheduled a hackathon so that we could basically generate ideas for how our company could better provide benefits to working parents, both birthing and non-birthing, but also to hand select a group of really diverse backgrounds so that we could also drive home the point of how important it is to have different points of view in solving a problem. And it was mostly young professionals, and it was an amazing experience, to kind of the energy and the thought and the way of working. And I think it's memorable to me because it was a real aha moment about the importance of intergenerational collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I think intergenerational collaboration is so important, and that's where a lot of the tension starts to come in the workplace, is when those generations are not working together. So again, something we'll talk about a lot today, but thank you for answering those lightning round questions. Now we'll jump into kind of the meat of our discussion today, which is asking, what are the trends that you're seeing right now in the startup world and beyond with young professionals? So, we talked a little bit about this last month, and I'd love for you to just reiterate some of those for the audience today.
Great. Yeah, it's been really amazing. So just to also give a little more context, our our startup is about 55 people, and I would say 90% of the company is in the young professional category, including our 3 women founders. So what I see, especially being one of the very few who are on the other side of that, is first of all, a redefining of what the role of work is. So for my generation, there was a real loyalty to an employer. That was really the default, that people would work for the same employer for most of their career. Resistant to change, I would say, or change was slow to come, a real value in knowledge and longevity of how long people had been there was really the core of kind of the value. And now moving into a predominantly young professional environment, I see so many changes. Purpose, is super important. Flexibility, and I know we'll talk a lot about that. I see the trends are, with a lot of my colleagues, even though they have not been in the work long, they've had experience at multiple companies. They have, as a result of that, their networks are expanding super rapidly. They have more opportunities. They negotiate better. They want flexibility, basically to work from multiple locations. And they really, really value bringing their whole self to work. It's super important.
Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that, bringing their whole self to work? Because I think a lot of the people in the audience who are those business leaders might disagree that young people are doing that. But can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I can. And some of this may go to the purpose of Cocoon. And, one of our purposes is to make sure that we are a leader, a thought leader, in offering generous leave benefits to employees. And we recently, for example, launched a compassionate leave policy ourselves, where an employee could take a leave of up to 4 weeks full pay, no questions asked, if they needed to do any number of things, whether it would be get reproductive care that wasn't offered in their state, whether it was to get experimental surgery, whether it was to get many, many things. Go bring yourself to work as you are. And if you need time to be away, we're here for you. And the way that shows up at Cocoon is people are not what I call covering, like as a younger professional when I had 3 young children and was trying to basically help with my mother who was sick, when I was trying to be really involved in my kids' activities. I felt like I had 2 personalities. I was at work, doing work, and I really didn't want to show that I had all these other obligations and commitments and desires in my life for fear that would detract from how I was perceived as a working woman. And so I realized, really only coming to Cocoon, where I feel so invited to just be exactly who I am and show up as I am. I find that has been a real defining difference for me in working with young professionals. That's what they expect. That's what they want. And that's kind of what we're delivering. And you can see people respond.
Thank you. You touched on so many important points there. And like I said earlier, I think we'll touch on a few of them again. So I want to jump to the next question. And going back to what we said last month when you and I spoke, we had talked about just the concept of young professionals being extremely entrepreneurial in nature. I know that one of your own daughters is very entrepreneurial. Maybe all of them are, but I know one in particular is. So what can you tell us about this shift and what does that mean for employers?
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of think back to after we were talking. I was thinking a little bit more about my own young professional children's experience or adult children's experience. And one thing is they grew up at such a different time, right? Where there were cell phones, there were ATMs, there was banking online and Uber and Lyft and meal service delivery and on-demand TV and so many things. And every time I say this list, I feel like I'm sounding like a dinosaur, but this is really relatively recent, right? In the last several decades. And as a result, I feel like the young professionals I work with always think, how can this happen? Not whether things can happen. And they
Mm-hmm.
naturally have an inclination for how to make things easier, how to take out redundancy, and also what they could do to start their own company. And there's no fear of being entrepreneurial and see it. Look at you, like, right? Look how brave you are, and taking a step at doing where your passion calls. And if if it doesn't work out or you need to pivot, there isn't that fear of failure. So I think that really breeds a lot of creativity, as well as there are so many opportunities to work for companies that are either traditional companies that are innovating or companies that are developing entirely new ways of doing things. And so I think that's one thing. And then I also think there's a cross population of people who are moving around into those roles. And so they're bringing the benefits of their thinking, but they also know the kind of archaic way many industries are still functioning, even if you think of environmental and all of the businesses that are spurring off around the need to solve climate change. So I think that call to purpose and mission, that lack of fear, the high expectations of being able to do things quickly, more efficiently, and more cheaply are really kind of foundational elements of that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think one of those takeaways for me is that you're seeing this trend of not really being scared to jump into something. And obviously I really resonate with that. But I'm a millennial. I think of my brother, who is just at the top of the Gen Zers, and he is the exact same way. He constantly is thinking of what he can do to be better, to branch off and do his own thing. And it's like he has no fear. I always think about that when I think of him, and I know his peers are like that too. So it's so interesting, again, based on how we were raised, how we were brought up, some of those factors that have attributed to making us this way and having that kind of fearless behavior in the workplace, which is also, I think, what contributes to the job hopping as well, because we're not scared of what others might think about it.
Exactly. And I think the other element that runs through that is speed. This is what I think one of my real aha moments was in joining Cocoon. I have never seen people move so fast to make decisions, to get comfortable, and to your point, no fear. So making the wrong decision doesn't mean you're doomed. Making the wrong decision just means you may iterate and change, and that's okay. If there's no stigma, that's not a failure. That's basically moving fast and getting better and being able to take and adjust very real-time feedback and make those changes.
Yeah. Let's talk about flexibility in the workplace. We already know how you feel about this. I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but tell us a little bit more about companies that are choosing to offer this flexibility. Maybe explain what Cocoon offers, and companies that don't choose to do it. What are the ramifications of that?
Yeah, it's such an interesting debate because I guess giving a little context, I ended up staying with the same company for a really long time, in part because I lived in Portland, Maine. I wanted to raise my family here. As a lawyer, it was only in-person experience. There were very few opportunities. You had to take the best of the opportunities here. Fast forward through COVID, and now I think there really is a dilemma for leaders of all companies on the value of having an in-person work culture. And so at Cocoon, we're trying to strike that balance. So we have 3 in-person work days. I'm a remote worker, so we do have a handful of workers that are remote. So it's my first time being remote. And the philosophy is that there is some importance to being able to build relationships, your first work relationships, especially to develop those. There is importance to being able to be together to make decisions quickly, especially because we are a startup and we have engineers and product builders and we have everyone at the table together. There is an energy around that. So there is 3 days in person. They are defined days in order to also maximize 2 days where people don't have to commute in, they don't have as many meetings, and there really are kind of head down focus days. And on the days that we're in the office, there also are kind of community events. So there's, breakfast burrito on Monday and breaking bread on Thursday and soft serve ice cream on Tuesday. So the whole idea of not being heavy handed, but trying to lure people in by the benefit of the experience. And I would say that said, there is a lot of flexibility. Again, back to the whole person. We're lucky to have a pretty diverse group, and many people have families in all parts of the world. So it is not unusual to have someone, say, working from Singapore for a month, a week of which they might be on vacation, but 3 weeks they may be with their family. Someone may be in Europe for a wedding and tack on 2 weeks to work remotely. So there is, I would say, some structure and a lot of freedom, that I think that's what you and I had talked about, control. And I think that knowing that there is that flexibility and there's not rigidity, and yet there is an expectation that we do value and really like being together to try to strike a balance. So,
right. And research is showing these high numbers of young professionals that are saying they do want that ownership, and they don't need 100% remote work. There's always going to be people that do want that only in-home experience, but a lot of people do want the collaboration. It's just having the choice.
Exactly. And I know for me, that has become really important. So I go to California about, once every month or 6 weeks. I have control over when I go. And we also, as a group of remote workers, the other thing I think that's important when you have not a fully distributed workforce and you have both is the effort to involve remote workers as much. And so I think we're doing a pretty good job of that now. We're getting better, and we're trying to have the remote workers kind of come in together. Last week was Hack Week. We had a week-long hackathon. We all, lots of great things happened, and talked about how can we make sure we include remote workers in all of this? We have offsites where everyone goes and everyone can be together. So I think it is important to try to balance the in-person and the remote, because there are a lot of benefits to building those relationships. But I also think, to your point, that flexibility and maintaining kind of control around flexibility is super important to young professionals. And I think the rest of us are learning that's important too.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, all really great points, and kudos to you all at Cocoon for identifying the needs and I think being really successful with offering this kind of flexible work. In the time that we have left, I have a few other questions for you, Michelle. And I wanted to know, since you have worked with so many young professionals throughout the course of your career, what are the key findings that you've learned about what young professionals truly need to be successful in the workplace? And what have you learned about this generation? So I think we've talked, and this has been a theme we've talked about the entire episode, but anything else that you think is pretty critical for our audience to know about young professionals, specifically what they need to be successful in the workplace?
Yeah, these are my observations. They're not afraid, like I said, to make a move to gain title, money, seat at the table. So I think it's really important for companies to appreciate on an individual level what a young professional is valuing at that point in time, and how their needs can be fulfilled. Because, truly, every time a company loses an employee that they want to keep, that's a loss of money and an investment. And it's always a gamble hiring someone else. So it's an individual thing. Young professionals not afraid to ask for fair wages and to push the needle on pay equity, which I think is awesome and is going to help companies move along. Not relying on work as the exclusive place to meet friends. That's, I think, a little bit different also than my generation, where people were with one another for decades, and that's where most of your friends were. Not afraid to challenge. Afraid to challenge the status quo at all. Purpose, I mentioned, important that there's purpose. I see that more and more, which I love. So I think that all of those and the things we've talked about are important. The only other thing I'd say when I was thinking about kind of observations and what do you need to be successful in the workplace is this coming back to where we started, of the generations coming closer together. And After we talked a month ago, and as I was thinking about talking to you today, I keep coming back to be curious, right? On both sides, like young professionals, be curious. I'm pretty proud of Cocoon for hiring me and my fellow crank co-founding counsel that they, despite being predominantly young professional, thought, oh, I think they might have something to offer us in a highly regulated industry.
Yes.
And they are curious, like they want to learn from us, and we are really curious and want to learn from them. And I keep coming back to that when we have these companies where there's separation, somehow the magic is in helping both understand that you're going to learn so much more from the other to make your life more fulfilling, but also to make your company more successful.
Absolutely. And I think when you surround yourself with others that are not like you and have different experiences, you end up thriving. And so that's something that as I build my business, I'm absolutely going to do, because I don't know everything. And there's a lot I don't know. And I need that support from people from the different generations, I think, to make this business the most successful it can be. So as the growing number of young professionals enter the workforce, the number is expected to continue rising in the next decade, and the Gen Xers and Boomers begin to retire. What do you see is the biggest challenge in the workforce?
Yeah, I think it is succession planning, intentional succession planning. I think in old school days, succession planning meant kind of transfer of knowledge. I think what succession planning means now is transitioning and accelerating leadership. And people are leaving. We're reading this every day, right? More people are leaving the workforce earlier. People are retiring. I think we can't get hung up on age in the evolution of people's careers. If people can do the job and they're ready for a VP role and they're 32, they're ready for a VP role when they're 32. Just because historically the trajectory might have looked like you had to check a lot of boxes. It can't anymore. And I think young professionals need to help the old guard appreciate that, and they need to push for it, and they need to really hold the, whatever the process is for evolving up the ladder, so to speak. Need to have those conversations and know what it takes and kind of pin people down to what it means as far as experience and outcomes, because ultimately we need this generation to expand and accelerate their leadership so that we get the benefit of all that you all are doing. And that is, I think, really crucial, having intentional succession planning.
Absolutely. It's not the first time I've heard that. And I think that will continue to be a challenge for the workforce. So talent conversations are not going away anytime soon. And I appreciate you sharing that. So thank you again, Michelle, for being here today. We packed a lot into a short period of time, but I think there's so many really important points here that our audience can take away with them. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure, Camber, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you again for joining us on The Great Retention with Camber Parker. Before you go, remember this, and I already mentioned this earlier. Young professionals make up nearly half of the workforce today and are expected to jump at a rapid rate in this next decade. What will you do as the business leaders of today to help them become the great leaders that we need for our future? Join us next time for more information on how to recruit and retain young professionals. And if you enjoyed this episode, which I hope you did, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. This helps others know where to find episodes about this topic. And don't forget to tell your coworkers, most importantly. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.